back. The mouse was frozen something. Anyway, this is my bragging sheet here. I just have been a wildland firefighter for 25 years, burned over, put together a lot of programs. In 2009, I was awarded by ICISF the Unsung Hero Award because the outgoing president didn't figure they'd actually recognize my work. And in 2013, they did, so it gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award. And then in 2018, Green Cross gave me one. So I'm a double Lifetime Achievement Award winner for whatever that's worth. And $1.50 gets me a cup of coffee. I'd like you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are. Who wants to start?
So Donna, if you could just start and introduce yourself, and then Cynthia maybe next.
Hi, I'm Donna Bunch. I'm the financial manager for YNI and CIHU.
Okay.
Hi, and thank you. I'm Cynthia York, and I am sort of semi-retired, but I'm working for CIHU and doing, very happy to help Jen and the team work with I used to work for the state. I was with the Department of Health and Welfare and managed and administrated their statewide healthcare innovation plan for primary health, incorporating the patient-centered medical home into primary health. So this is very interesting to me, and thank you very much for providing your time and the presentation.
You bet. Glad to.
And Stephanie, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then Jane, and then Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Gallegos. I work for CIHU as well, and I'm also a behavioral health consultant with Family Care Clinic.
Okay.
Hi, and I'm Jane Harris, and thank you for being here and doing this today. Much like Cynthia, I'm semi-retired, but spent about 35 years in primarily nonprofit behavioral health and community health settings. Have dabbled a little bit in for-profit corporate health, as well as most recently came from the American Cancer Society, where I was working on population health and screening programs, but very excited to hear your presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm Rebecca Rasaborski. I am a contractor for CIHU. I used to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm a healthcare economist. So a little bit different from the people that I guess work in mental health as providers or on the policy side.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today.
Yes. Is that everybody?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I'll finish the slides here. Just the details for the 2-hour training. Need to sign in. You got to sit for the whole course. And I explained we'd take a break after an hour. Some of what I tell you, some of what you see might hit you where you live. And if it does, you brought that with. I am not doing it to you. It may evoke powerful emotions from prior traumas. Respect others' experiences. May seem like review, but it's still important. Some of you have been doing all of this together. We just, compassion fatigue puts it in perspective, as does psychological first aid. There will be a certificate of attendance for attending this. You can ask questions anytime you wish, just throw them out and I'll answer them. Course structure starts with CISM, Critical and Distress Management from the incident ICISF, and compassion fatigue is Green Cross's strength and what we do most of in training and in work. When you leave here, you have the ability to use it. Take this information, use it as you wish. You don't have to be a therapist or a counselor. In fact, most of our people, when we deploy, we've got one mental health and 3 or 4 others that are nurses, housewives, retired folks, whatever. Anybody that's deployed is going to be using this type of stuff. And the skills you learn are designed as successful building blocks to help provide functional skills and manage crisis situations. So I'm not saying you can get through everything all the time with these, but this is one of our best tools. This is psychological first aid was developed after 9/11. It was actually a product of 9/11. The president, within 3 months, mandated all 50 states will provide psychological first aid training. And all of 50 states were sent a packet or they developed their own. A lot of the slides you're going to see here today are slides that we in Minnesota put together over the years, meeting different criteria and so on. So this is one of the packets that came out of it. It's the best used tool, the most used tool in any deployment situation. You're going to be doing a lot of psychological first aid. You're going to be doing very few mental interventions, right? Defusings, debriefings, and things like that. That comes later, but the work this what you're learning now. This is what you do when you hit the ground and they're still bleeding. And what we're going to cover is what it is, where it's done, why we do it, and who does it. It's kind of the guidelines for the rest of the show. And the principles and techniques developed over the years is set up and developed and lived by the 4 basic standards that consistent with research evidence on risk and resilience following trauma. It's based on that from a long ago, just things we picked together. It's applicable and practicable in field settings. And field settings are anywhere, in hospitals, on the road, on a site as it's going on, right after the hurricane, right after the tornado, right after the flood. It's appropriate to developmental levels with just whatever level of we're working with, we use their language to work with them. It is culturally informed. Many times when we deploy, especially to the West and the South, we'll have at least one Spanish-speaking bilingual on our team to make sure that we're covering almost everybody that we'll work with. By description, psychological first aid is, and I'm not going to read all these slides to you, but I'll read this one, is a set of skills that helps community and residents care for their families, friends, neighbors, and themselves by providing basic psychological support in the aftermath of traumatic events. And we're talking psychological support, and we're fusing that with physical support. So, psychological first aid is a model that integrates public health and community and individual psych. Includes preparedness for communities, workplaces, schools, does not rely on direct services by mental health professionals. You'll have one somewhere in the system, but on the ground, you may or may not. And it uses skills you already have. The skills that you've developed in your line of work are going to come with you when you're doing psychological first aid. There are 3 parts to it. First is understanding the common symptoms and the responses associated with trauma. What are the things we normally see, and where will we see them, and how will we manage? So part 2 is being a good listener. If you're not, you won't do psychological first aid for very long, because most of it is having them share. And part 3 is resource awareness. Just know wherever we are, we've got guidelines from the incident command system or whatever on what's available where, and as we're working with folks, we'll pass that on to them. By definition, psychological first aid is a supportive intervention for the use in and immediately following disasters, terrorism, any impactful event. It's one of our main tools is disaster stress management. Most people that are signed up as disaster persons have been mandated to take the course, and they do. And we train it every year. And a lot of places come back every year and retrain, remind them. And we remind them that it is not therapy. Mental health people have a problem with that level sometimes because we're trying to do therapy when we're psychologically first aiding, and it doesn't work. Disaster mental health, in the overview, focuses on normal people responding to an abnormal event. And 80% of the people exposed to a critical incident have had some kind of reaction within 3 weeks. And that's no matter where they are in the world, what language they speak, whatever. Any given event where there's critical reactions to it, 80% of people are going to be affected by it. So by picture, this is the impact of the event, just goes out all different directions, affecting everything and everybody. This circle kind of represents the 80%. That's the amount of people that will be impacted by it and process it. And some of them can process it fairly quickly, some will take a while. We find that 30% of people are affected to the point where what they do and how they act is changed, is adapted to the new or reacting from the new. And we find that 3% actually develop psychiatric illness from it. So this is studies that's been going on for 20 years. We've got a bulk of studies that are verifying these odds usually hold true. Why do we do it? We do it because people have this terrific event, horrific event happen, and they're overwhelmed. And we know that we can come in and just help them through this part of it as we're processing the event, as they're processing the event. And it's good for everybody. I mean, if I deploy, I guarantee you that I've worked with, if I worked with 10 civilians, I've worked with 2 official first responders, or 3 out of the 10. So they're in there getting their hands bloody and so on, and they're really affected. The people, the citizens and volunteers are always looking for help. The first responders kind of have a hard time accepting it until we start talking, and then they realize that, yeah, they could use some help too. Where do we do it? I've done them in hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. If it happened and it's bad enough that it makes the news, somebody's probably doing psychological first aid at it. So we'll be there. Honestly, we get a call, for instance, at Green Cross, when we deploy, this is our main tool. And we'll deploy on scene. For instance, we went to New Orleans. We flew 300 miles in and then drove 300 miles to get there because we couldn't get any closer with the aircraft. We got on scene and they were expecting us. We had I worked for Green Cross, and Green Cross does not deploy without a contract. And we had a contract with the SPCA that we would work with their people as we're working with the animals that were coming out of the flood. And so we got there, and In fact, it took us about 3 days to put our team together, get everything in and get going down there. And during that time, they kept telling the people that were working there, help is coming, help is coming. And in fact, they had little stick figures on boards of a bicycle and a stick figure riding the bicycle and saying, help is coming, help is coming. Sykes on bikes. So by the time we got there, we checked in at the front gate, and this was an enclosed 80-acre area. We checked in at the front gate, and we told the guy who we were, and he looked at, and then we could see the light come on. He said, Sykes on bikes, right? I said, well, I don't know about that. So we were Sykes on bike. We were really well accepted, and overhead brought us right in. We sat on the board in the meetings, but it really went well. We were expected to help, and we did help. We were down there for about 6 weeks, and they worked with somewhere over 10,000 animals. And we worked with a number, probably up in the thousands of people that we did our green project with.
Wait, Lord, Finch. Call from Blaine.
Sorry about that. That's Murphy. I expected him to come. I'm glad he did to know what's going to do. The target outcomes. What are we doing psychological first aid for? The first is restore safety. That's the one thing people have lost when a crisis is overwhelming to them, the sense of safety. So we make sure that they are safe, number one, physically, and that they feel safe. We help them to function with what they're doing. We have and empower action. So we're there just to do whatever that person needs. And each day it's different, and each person is different. There's 3 areas that we're looking for outcomes with psychological first aid. The first is safety. Restoring physical safety and diminishing the physiological stress response. So we're doing that by identifying that it's normal and letting them know that where they are is what they need to do. Function is facilitating psychological function, to get them back in the front of the brain, thinking like they need to, about what they need to do and how they're doing it, and that they're safe. The third one is action, pushing the action towards disaster recovery, returning them to normal activities and whatever their norm was. How do we do that? Using skills we already have. Every one of us comes in with our background and our work and our training, and we use that tool to help whoever we're working with. So we use the skills we have, use them in an effective manner, really find a good use for them, and learn to identify when to use them. So when we do and when we don't. What do we do? Psychological first aid means doing things that are active, practical, and familiar. People feel safe because we're practicing psychological first aid. Ensure safety. Move them to a safer location. If they're overwhelmed standing where they are, we'll say, come with me, let's go sit over here in the shade and we'll talk about where you are or whatever. Remove them from whatever hazards is possible as they go through it. If they need medical concerns, we'll take them right to the med tent. And most of it can give them information. They'll have something simple that they need to ask or talk about, and we'll address that. We tend to their physical safety. At first, we do that, then we can talk about their mental safety. So if whatever they need, water, blanket, chair, food, and sometimes just being there. We were working the mountain slide in Oregon, Washington State, the Oso mudslide. And myself and Peggy were compassion fatigue on the north side of it. And we had another team on the south and another team on the west. But one of the workers out there, and all the workers were wearing hats that recognized them as being as supposed to be there. So coming up towards us, towards our what we call the edge of the mud, where we work the edge of the mud, and he's bringing a person with him. And as they get closer, we can see it's an elderly lady, and she's got something in her hand. We don't know what it is. We can't tell, but he comes up. He knows what we're doing. We've got our vests on and so on. So he says, "I found this lady wandering out there, and she's agreed to come with me. And I told her you guys were waiting to talk to her, and so he handed her off to us, and Peg and I got one on each side, and we walked with her, and we had our own little tent. So we went to our tent, asked what she wanted, would she eat some coffee or something, and she wouldn't say anything at first. Ann went got some water and coffee, or Peggy did, and she finally started talking, and we asked her what that was in her hand, and she said, "My son and daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren died in the flood, and I was out looking for something, and all I could find was this shingle from their house." So we normalized that. That was a great thing to do. You're doing the best you can. Worked with her, and through radio contact, and passed her on to our main center, where there was a place where we were putting these people up at night, and she stayed there for a few days. But that's the kind of thing we do with compassion fatigue, you know. That's what we were out there for, and that's what we did. Another thing I work in the Oslo mudslide did, I don't know if you remember it or worked it. There was an earthquake out in Washington State, and about like a 3.8, but it shook some mountain loose. And a heavy rain, the mountain came down. There was 80 some building sites on it, and anybody that was home died. Nobody survived that. And we were called out to work the slide for Green Cross. Our headquarters, one of them is in little town of Barrett, so right close. So we put our people on site, and we worked for, like I say, 6 or 8 weeks there, and did a lot of psychological first aid every day. That's all we did. And we'd take the people to where they needed to go, or there were some people that wouldn't move, and we worked with them to make sure that they were not in harm's way. All psychological first aid working. We're offering very practical assistance. Let me walk you over to wherever you need to go. What do you need most? And you can ask this question 1,000 times and get 1,000 different answers. What do you need right now? It might be a drink of water. It might be talk to my daughter. It might be whatever. But each of them have something that if we can help them with, they feel like they're really have a step forward. I talked about the work we did down in New Orleans. My friend Mary, she's actually head of Green Cross. Her and I work together whenever we can, and our team was broken into 3 areas. There was 3 areas of work that they were doing. There was the retrievers that went and got the animals that people called in about. There was the veterinarians that worked with the animals, and then there were the third group was the group that got the animals and the owners back together. But we deployed, when they deployed, we would embed one of our compassion fatigue people with the team, because they're going out to pick up some animals that have been called in by phone or notified, and there might be, they survived because they were eating on their dead manager or dead owner and things. So that team was running into rough stuff. So we embedded with them, and we did defusings every day for that group. The second group, the veterinarians, once in a great while, they needed some interventions, but we were there just mainly to share coffee with them and let them know they're doing okay. And the third group, that's where we went when we wanted to feel good, because they're getting the owner and the pet together. So I'm working one day, and this guy, so happy he found his 8-foot long python. I said, how in the hell do you know this python? But he knew it was, and apparently the python knew it too. And another thing, there was an 80-acre horse. It was also, there were 3 or 4 barracks in there and sheds. And one of the sheds was toward the Mardi Gras. Mary being Mary saw that. She didn't tell any of us, but the next we get there, and here comes Mary down be goes on to what bees around her neck. She would somebody like her have a problem, and they tell me a good thing, give you some beads. And she 3 loads of beads at first. By the afternoon, look, bead lady. Let it be, they just didn't eat, just don't eat it. So Mary is still bead lady today from that, but those kind of things available, we use and make it work. Everybody got a kick out of it, and everybody gave from it. What do people need? You're doing psychological first aid, those just need to talk. Somebody is pressed. Little age. She weeping, silently weeping, but she was at home. What do we do? If they think you're not going to be doing it at all. Body. Management is we manage is the chemical reaction with people in no matter what your question, no matter what, the same reactions, chemical reactions and reactions. Before I get to them, trying about stopping there, ease of and the brain automatic to deliver nuts and
I'm sorry. Middle of the computer. I think it's a take for 10 minutes.
sure.
I and come back at 10:15, and hopefully shouldn't be a little particular.
Or something.
internet. Take a break for 10 minutes and come back. 15.
Okay. I still got the brain up in front of you.
Yes.
Stress works just like alcohol, so I'll take you through it. The man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, the drink takes the man. First thing that's overwhelmed is the reasoning part of the brain. They're back into the emotions, running everything, happy or sad or whatever. If they drink enough that that's overwhelmed, all that's left is the brainstem working. And if they drink enough that that's overwhelmed, they die. But stress works the same way as does alcohol on the brain. The higher stressed you are, the more it's going to affect you. And again, the reasoning part of the brain is the first thing that's overwhelmed. So our job in most of the crisis work we do, and especially in our compassion fatigue and our this one here, is getting them back to the front of the brain. So we ask questions, just simple questions, but questions they have to go to the front of the brain to get. So we can bring them back, and many times, more times than I can tell you, I've seen this happen where with our doing our compassion fatigue, our psychological first aid, sitting down and talking with them, and you can just see the eyes light up again, and they're talking, they're grounded. You can ask them questions, they're reacting. So what happens as soon as the body goes into the stress response, there's 132 chemicals mixed in your body. It's the fight or flight thing that saves us. It's the reason that we can get through crises and still manage things. 132 chemicals. We call it the chemistry of survival. The 3 areas of chemicals that are affected are the catecholamines, which is the reds, the uppers. This is what kicks in the fight or flight response. They're just the chemicals that actually save us. They cause us to get into things and get excited and get whatever needs to be done. The second area of chemicals that are affected and that we see is their corticosteroids' job is to moderate and control the catecholamine level. Keep that fight or flight in check. Well, herein lies one of our first problems with the chemicals, because the greater the catecholamine drive, the less corticosteroids there are. And if you're in full fight or flight response, the corticosteroids shut down about the time you need them the most. The third area of chemicals, and the ones we typically recognize most, because they're right out there or stand out, is that the indigenous opioids, all of the opioids that dump so that we can survive, we get through it without fail. And that does things like create a heightened threshold of pain. How many of you yourself, or you have been someplace where something happens that's exciting and you don't realize that you're bleeding until somebody points it out, or you look down and you might have a cut on your hand or your body or whatever, and you didn't even know it until you went down. The heightened threshold of pain that covers that. One of the ways we survive. Many times we're going to see dissociative reactions and blending of emotions, feelings of euphoria, And when it mixed with the catecholamines, we'll see some amnesia. So I'll give you a couple examples. The blunting of emotions, feelings of euphoria. Front of the brain is overwhelmed, and we're working from midbrain. And the things that we're processing through aren't what real life is. I was witness to a car accident. One of my family members was killed in a car and accident. And they were in front of us. Myself and my child were in a vehicle following my wife, and she worked at a high school in this little town we lived in nearby. And we were treating this twice a month. We would drive to Fargo for treatment for our child. So she would drop her car off, and then we'd ride out and back, and then the car would be there for her to come home. So she's ahead of us. We see her drop over the hill. We start down the hill. My child says, "Dad, that's Mom's car in the ditch." I said, "No, it wasn't," but I could see that it was. So I pushed her head down on the seat, and as I tell you this, I can feel her hair in the palm of my hand right now. We coasted down, and I held her down so she didn't look out the window, because I could see the vehicle and something out the window. And so just as I'm coming to a stop, the law enforcement dude from the little town comes from the other way, and he parks between me and her vehicle, and he said, "Case, don't go there." And he come back and said, "Case, don't go there. What do you want to do?" And I guess I said, I should call the in-laws. So he flagged down the next car going our way, and this is 6 in the morning, right? And dropped off at my friend's house. I called the in-laws and got back to the accident. And the next thing I remember is like 3 hours later. I don't know how long, much later, but it was something like that, that I got a ride from the veterinarian back to my house. About a month later, I had this young fella come in my office, and he said, "Mr. Casey, do you know who I am?" And I said, looked at him, and I said, "Well, I think you're one of the Lapinoia boys from Monaga, ain't you?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm the guy that gave you a ride into town that morning of the accident." And I said, "Oh, I want to thank you for that. Thank you so much." I didn't remember who that was. And he said, "What do you remember about that ride into town?" It was about a mile. I says, "Nothing." He said, "Well, let me tell you, you were singing nursery rhymes." I was what? "Yeah, you were singing nursery rhymes all the way into town. Old MacDonald, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and mentioned a couple others." Why was I doing that? Blunting of emotions, feelings of euphoria. My unconscious wasn't going to let me go where I would go. Those 132 chemicals driving. And so it just put them there in place. So I share the story because if you're working with somebody and their emotions and reactions aren't what you think they would be at all, it's because of the chemical dump. Those 132 chemicals aren't allowing them to do that right now. With the dissociative and amnesia, very normal, sometimes just a few seconds, sometimes longer. I have another story. I was 25 years a wildland firefighter. About the 15th year, I'd been burned over 3 times. I started with the state, and about 6 years after that, the state of Minnesota signed a reciprocity with the feds. And from that time on, I spent most of my non-snow months west of the Mississippi and above 5,000 feet. So my first assignment out there, I was assigned a little California Native American named Jimmy Groove. He was a nice guy, just a wonderful guy. One of my best friends from that day on went to work for him. And we got done with the first run. We go out for 3 weeks, didn't go home, and I was heading home, and he rated me as average, and I said, "What the hell are you talking about? I did better than you did." And he said, "Yeah, but Dan, if I don't give you an average now, I can't give you a promotion later. So you should start here. The next time you come out, you get a step. The next time you come out, you get a step." Oh, so we'll play the game. So we did. So I worked with Jimmy every time I got a chance. I got on a fire he was on. We got together, and anyway, he and I are both division supervisors by this time, and a division soup in wildland fire is in charge of a certain area or line. So I had B and he had C divisions. We each got about 100 people working for us. And the division soup's job is to make sure everything's safe, everything's working, and everything's going the way it should. So we just kind of meander along our line all day long. So Jimmy had his and mine, and we walked out together and decided we'd have lunch together, and we did. And come quitting time, we just shut it down, and division soup is always the last guy off the line. So we get sure everybody's left, and we walk the line, make sure things are safe, and then we headed back. Well, I gotta just give you a description of Jimmy so you get a good picture of this guy. He was like I say, Chumash Indian, and he was a sawyer. He had a 40-inch saw. And if he put that across his shoulders, that's how wide he was. And if he stood it up, that's how tall he was. This greatest guy had so much fun. Anyway, we meet, we put it all together, lines clear, and we're starting to walk back, and we walking the fire line, and Jimmy said he had to take a whiz, so I walked about 15 feet ahead, 20 feet ahead of him, and stopped, and he'd stop there when he said that. And I need to explain one more thing when you get the story here. The West's covered with ponderosa pine, and that's a weed tree, very high density juice in the needles. And when a fire goes through ponderosa pine stand, there's nothing left but stems. Branches are all gone, needles are all gone. And if they're over 35 years old, they're typically hollow. So when we're doing mop-up, you touch the bottom of every tree to see if it's hot, because they'll be burning inside, and they'll burn through and then they fall. And when they fall, there's no wind resistance. So the natives call them angels, angel wings. Anyway, Jimmy stops. I walk 20 feet. I hear a kind of a shh. I turn around, and angel wings has got Jimmy pinned to the ground. Walk over there, and he's got a stab into his chest. Tree weighs a ton. I can't move the tree, can't move part of it. I stay with him a few minutes, see that he's gone, and I head back to camp, apparently. The next thing I remember from working over Jimmy's body was waking up or coming to, or the next thing I remember was in the med tent, working with a lady that I'd known for quite a long time. She was the head nurse there. I lost about 3.5, 4 hours completely. I didn't try to remember it, but I didn't remember a bit of walking back, telling them of the whole story, checking in with the incident command, and then going to the med tent for the burns I had. Dissociative reactions, amnesia, very common. My unconscious just said, you don't have to go there, Case, and I didn't. And I still don't have most of that 3 hours that I lost, and I don't want to get it. I'm just saying, this is the chemistry of survival, what the 132 chemicals do so we survive. And I'm going to go through some reactions that we get from that. Physiological reactions having to do with that 132 chemicals. And this is just the top branch of them. And for every one of these that happen, there's a survival reason. For each one that happens, there's also a negative piece to it if it goes on too often or too long. In this case, the adrenaline kicks in, cortisol levels rise, protects us from allergic reactions. We don't blink, we don't sneeze. The negative side of it is our immune system is depleted and the body goes into starvation mode. So your immune system is depleted. If one of you gets sick, you all get sick, right? Somebody gets a cold, it goes through the whole team. They told us when we first started working with the feds that we needed to take in 5,000 calories a day just to maintain. There's no way I could ever do that, but that was what they recommended. Well, the body goes into starvation mode because of the chemical dump, and you're trying to do that. You still can't do that, but that's where we are with it. Another one is your thyroid kicks in. Your thyroid job is just to manage things as you go along, go through life. When they get into the stress response and 132 chemical kicks in, it starts working as good as it can for as long as it can. Everything's working at peak resistance so that we survive. The negative side of this is burnout faster. You're just not going to be able to do what you do as long as you typically can. Endorphins kick in. This is nature's opium. This is where you can have a cut or a broken bone and you don't know it until you feel it, or until you see it, I mean. When the endorphins burn out or are used up, those little hurts become big. Football injuries got you living in that. Car accident where you broke your shoulder and your shoulder's hurting again. They're typically managed with the 2 endorphins, can't be managed here. It shuts down the digestive tract. You don't need to eat right now for us to survive. Muscles in, drink here. Negative side location. Ever been up in front of a group 2 or 20 or 2,000 to give a talk, and your apple stuck? That's because this has happened. This physiological reaction is shut down, so the digestive tract shuts down that. So, what do we do about that? You can fix that one easy. Just have some water, prime the pump. You can get through it. But the digestive all the are down 8 hours couldn't eat. No. So when we got on the fire line, eat $3,000 a day. Shut down. Body goes into survival mode, menstrual cycle, and brings it up and just say, it's body you survive. It's not a permanent thing. So they together because they work together. The body short distance energy, all is long distance energy. Brain tells start turning and I'm going to need that for short distance energy. Start cholesterol for long distance energy. Now, the negative disease with the sugar, it's on diabetics. Your diabetic should be checking you a lot more often. As cholesterol, every iota of cholesterol that isn't burned stays there. It's going to stay in your system, and pretty soon you're not. But somewhere along the line, you're going to be plugged enough or clogged enough to have to get some rerouting done. Had mine done in '88. Heart and lungs work together. The heart, the brain says you two are going to work more now because lungs, I want you collecting more oxygen. So you're going to breathe deeper. And heart, you're going to be pumping that thickened blood with oxygen in it through the system. So you're going to harder, and it will. If you're in place and stop, you have to feel your body to feel your body and feel it going through your system. If you have a bad heart or high blood pressure, sooner or later something's going to give. With the lungs, I came up with the stuff on smokers, and that doesn't matter much anymore. They just go, if you smoke the first 2 minutes of given fire, you have a non-smoker because you're used to smoking your lungs. But after that, it becomes a disadvantage much faster. Skin is the largest organ of our body, the ones that protects us. If you go in and out of a lot, every time you do, your skin tightens, it makes sure everything is okay. You're going to get dry nose, scaly skin. It's just a physiological reaction. Your skin is acting too much with the chemicals, and it can't keep up. And all senses become much more acute, and say all 6 senses, because that 6th one is there. We're more prone to accidents on it, mostly because when your body goes into the full stress response, the outside 30% of your vision is shut off. So all you've got left when you're in full crisis response is that 40% that's right straight ahead. That's why we're more prone to accidents. We can't see anything out here or out here on the sides until we get through that. Also with your senses, they're prone, their job is to keep us alive. And so you get an event happen and it's overwhelming, your senses will start shutting down. Not permanent, but they'll shut down temporarily just so that that part of you doesn't have to work, so the other part can work better. So they'll shut down 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 to 1. And for most of us in this hemisphere, that one is vision. That's why when you kick in a memory, for most of us, you have a picture of that event just as clear and as colorful as it was the day it happened. We also know that during the first sleep after a given event, your unconscious puts back as many of the senses as it can, so that when you wake up after a given event the next morning, your unconscious has put together as much sense as it's probably going to, and you'll have the purest picture you'll ever have in memory you'll ever have of that event. That's why a lot of law enforcement agencies today say, okay, it happened today, fill it out today, turn it in the morning. Whatever you add in the morning is still fact. After that, it's wherever it came from. So right back to this, back to the event, 80% of us are affected, 50% of us are fine out of that, 30% are still bothered, and 3% need more help tonight than we can give them online. We're going to go through some common reactions here, adults and then kids. Typical things we see. Sleep difficulties. Your unconscious isn't going to let you get into level 4 sleep. It'll go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 all night long. It won't let you down into level 4 sleep, where we dream and where we process things. It's going to bother our body. Diarrhea, cramps, stomach upset, nausea, elevated heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar. With extended stress, suppression of the immune system functioning. So we're much more likely to be sick after we've gone through an event because this immune system isn't working right. With kids, we typically see and hear from them headaches and stomach aches. We see some nausea, vomiting, eating problems, speech difficulty, skin eruptions. All these things are normal reactions to abnormal events. Emotional reactions with adults, we're going to see sadness, depression, fear, anger, numbing, disconnection. One of the main signs I look for is a lack of involvement or enjoyment in favorite activities. If you're the person that goes out for a walk or a horseback ride whenever you can and you're not doing that anymore, there's something going on with you. The sense of emptiness or hopelessness is one of the things we see in adults too. With kids, as you would expect, their anxiety and vulnerability, they're used to the world being right and we're providing it, and we're not able to do that because of this event. So they're afraid of it. Is it going to happen again? They don't want to be left alone, especially parted from the family. They lose that sense of safety. Actually see them repressed back into, say, a sixth grader back acting like a 6-year-old acting like a 3-year-old type of thing. Depression, anger, and guilt also. Behavioral reactions with adults. Substance abuse is first because it's usually the main one. Overprotective of the family. We keep excessively busy so we don't have to think about it or focus on it. Isolating ourselves from others, family difficulties, being very alert at times, the startle effect is in. How many of you have seen that or done it yourself? You're doing something, then you're so focused on it. When somebody comes in, slams the door, or speaks to you, and you jump 4 feet in the air because it's behavioral reaction, the chemical reaction working against us. Avoiding places, activities, or people that bring back memories, very common. Children, they regress, as I said, 6-year-old acting like a 3-year-old. Bedtime problems, sleep insomnia, midnight awakening, fear of the dark, fear of event occurrence during the dark. Thinking, cognitive reactions of adults, hard time concentrating and memory. How many of you just get that at the tip of your tongue and you can't think what the hell you're trying to say? That's stress or old age, one of the two. Recurring dreams or nightmares. Your unconscious runs this until it's safe, and it doesn't realize it's doing you harm. It's trying to fix this for you. And one of the things you can do with that is, if you've got a recurring dream that keeps waking you up, just tell your unconscious, I don't want to dream about that Friday at noon, or I'll think about it then. Kubler-Ross gave us a tool 50 years ago, and it works. Just if you got the same thought coming down, you're trying to sleep, you can't sleep, not do anything else, the thought comes around, you say, nope, Friday at noon. And give it half an hour, and then next Friday at noon. Your unconscious will process it in the unconscious. Flashbacks, difficulty communicating. With kids, really hard to concentrate. This may appear as a behavioral problem instead of a mental problem. Confusion, memory loss. School may be where children functions best. That's where they feel safest. Spiritual and faith reactions, both adults and children. Reliance on faith. Questioning values and belief. How can that happen? Directing anger from God. Cynicism. All the things that we have to process, most of us, when we go through a horrible event. Why did that happen? Why would God let that happen? Type of thing. Common sensory reactions. It's going to bother all 6 of your senses. What you see, how things taste, different smells, what you hear, what you touch. And the 6th one, the ones you sense, what your sensing apparatus is adapted. An event is more stressful or traumatic when it's unexpected. When a lot of people die, especially if kids die, really, really bad. If it lasts for a long time. The problem with the floods in Oregon and other places we worked, the fire in California, we were there 8 weeks out, and a few of us went back a year to the day later of the fire, and we was there were a lot of people that are still having problems that we talked with before. If they don't know what caused it, the thought of the unknown has always scared people more than anything else on this list. If the event is meaningful and it impacts a large area, that they're talking about war for one thing. How do we help people readjust emotionally to any given event or to the world? Number one is accept the event and the loss and identify what it was and how it's affecting you, and that you're going to get through it. Labeling and expression of our emotions, sometimes giving it a bad name helps us instead of thinking about it. Regaining a sense of mastery and control over your life. The more you do that, that's what we're doing in psychological first aid, is giving them back some control of their life. This is a card, it's Minnesota Psychological First Aid card that I don't have any with, but I can see if Jen wants me to send some out. I'll see if I can find them again. But it's a pocket card that when you stop at the scene of an accident or you're called out, this is one of the things that help people process it. There's a couple other things that we'll get at before we're done here today, but this was a card that's been around. This was again mandated by the federal government. You will have some type of a handout that people can use. So we put it on cards. Promote safety. How do you do that? Number one, remove them from immediate danger, right? They're from the danger area as soon as possible. So if we're on site with our hats on, we're doing our psychological first aid, and we're asked to talk to somebody or we're talking to somebody, at least we're going to do is remove them from seeing what's happened. So we might just be turning them around, turn their back to the event. But if we can find a safe place where we can sit and they feel comfortable and we can talk to them, and our tools are hand out in one hand and a bottle of water in the other, and they'll use both of them and be thankful for them. So that's basic survival needs. Most often, people need somebody to talk to. Let them talk. Someone to care, someone who really listens, someone to lean on, cry with, be present. So if you're doing psychological first aid, you're not in any hurry. There's some, if I'm working an 8-hour shift, there's some I'll work with for 3 minutes, and some I might spend an hour with, depending on how the event is affecting them and what coping mechanisms they're using or that they have. We need to let them realize that we're with them. Compassionate presence, body language, make eye contact, tone of voice, facial expressions, all those things that tell them that we are hearing what they're saying. Active understanding. If you don't quite get what they're talking about, ask them to clarify it, because they might not know what they're saying either. So you don't do the why or why not, you don't judge, but ask them what happened. Well, what happened then? What happened first? What happened then? What did you do after that? If you can walk them back through it, it helps them settle. We're not going to evaluate their experience or their actions, and we're not going to interrupt while they're talking. We're just there for them. What do we typically see? Loss of control, being verbally agitated. Some people become agitated. It doesn't matter if no matter what we're trying to do. Some are really upset, and then what we do is just let them go, just stay there with them, let them express and try to bring them back. Some refuse to follow directions, some become threatening. It's usually not personal. And their reaction to an uncommon situation has nothing to do with us. Be calm, kind, compassionate. And to do the right with your team, you have to do that too. We would break, well, when I worked in Haiti after the earthquake, I took a group into the hospital. And it was a hospital of 200 beds that already had 800 people in it. And we were working with the staff. They were working with the victims, we worked with the staff. And their main stressor of all of them they had was that the people they were turning back from the door. There were people coming all day, and there's 800 people already in a 200-bed hospital, and they could give them some medication, identify what's going on, and give them some things to take home or not. But that's all they had. And the nurses were having the hardest job of it all. Myself, and this is an aside, the worst thing for me was they had pallets and pallets of food that they weren't handing out. And they had military people sitting on these pallets, so the people didn't steal any. And watching 12-year-old girls sell themselves to the soldiers so they could take some food home to their family was tough. But anyway, I had 3 people working with me, and after the first 2 hours, what I did the whole rest of the week was every 2 hours, we stopped what we were doing and we went to our little corner and we talked about what's going on with you right now. Where are you with this right now? We had to do that in order to survive. And we did a thorough debriefing when we left there and then when we got back home again. First aid don'ts. Don't ask about in-depth stuff. Just where are you at with this? Where are you at? How's it going with you? As far as they want to take you, talk, but don't lead them through it. And we're not going to ask them for details in any trauma or loss. It's not okay to do this. That's like, let's talk about something else. Nah, they need to talk about what they're talking about. You should work on getting over this. You're strong enough to deal with it. I know how you feel. That one there will get you slapped right in the mouth. You don't know how I feel. You're going to get that one right back. You'll feel better soon. You did everything you could. You're lucky to be alive. Another one to get you kicked. You need to relax. It's good that you're alive. Not so good. Very easy to say, you seem to be surviving. What else can I do? What do you need? It is okay to recommend substitute solutions that are more useful. If you see them doing something that they shouldn't be doing or not healthy for them, don't just try to stop them. You also say, why are you doing this and what else could you do? If they ask a question you can't answer, just say, I'll find out and get back to you. Or I'll find somebody that can help you. Provide basic information about common stress reactions. That's all of our handouts. Every day we would print different handouts and we would hang them on the inside of toilet doors and in the showers, shower rooms and things like that, where people could just, like one was a checklist. How many of these are you experiencing right now? If you've got over 4, you should take a day off, type of thing. Provide basic information on coping, stress reactions. The first aid card, use that. Teach simple relaxation techniques like deep breathing and muscle relaxation. You can slow down anybody in any group if you just If they're with you and you practice deep breathing and have them breathe in and breathe out by the numbers. Philology Institute come up with that, and it really works well. Not so good coping strategies. The right-hand one explains itself. The left side, excessive withdrawal, retreat, avoidance. High use of fantasy. They're in la la land all the time because they can't face the facts. Impulsive behavior, venting on weaker individuals, or over-dependent behavior. Lack of empathy. All of those signs that say they're really having a hard time. Instead of trying to judge them, try to help them. Positive coping strategies. Hopefully they're actively seeking assistance. That gives you an idea that they know they need some help. Reacting constructively to environmental challenges and recognize the potential for growth. Use of non-destructive defenses such as humor, exercise, good eating habits, time management, relaxation. Connectedness. Help to connect with friends and loved ones. One of the best things you can do in anything you're doing is if you can tie them in with somebody they know. After the fire in California, I was out there a few weeks afterwards, and we were there for 3 weeks, I think, myself. And the small town where the fire actually burned everything out, 80% of the people died, and so on. They had no potable water except what Starbucks would bring in. So Starbucks was a collection place for the town. And we set up there. The Starbucks gave us the okay, so I brought our Green Cross team in, and some of us sat outside and some inside, and we back and forth. And anyway, one of the last days I was there, I was working with a gentleman that had lost his wife in the fire. And a few days earlier, I was working with a lady about his same age that had lost her husband in the fire, both alone. And he talked for a while, and I said, do you mind if I take a minute to myself? And he said, no. And I went up and talked to the lady, and I brought her back. And his name was Jim, and Jim never Jack. Anyway, I said, you know, you both lost the light of your life. You lost your husband, you lost your wife. I think you guys could do yourself some good. Just why don't you sit down and just talk? You know, you can understand much more than I can listening to where you're at. So they did that. And they were, by the time I'd left, they were jabbering so much. I mean, they were talking so with each other to the point where they didn't hear me say goodbye type of thing. I was there a year later on the anniversary date of the fire. And of course, back to Starbucks because that's what I knew mostly. And both of them came in together. And they saw me come over. I got some of the biggest hugs that I'd had for quite a long time because they were still together. From that day, they were together to the point where they were inseparable and they have each other. And they were healthy as you could be and still go through that. So connect them, try to help them connect with others. Alarm bells. Talking to somebody, they're unresponsive, glassy-eyed, vacant stare, they're disoriented. You see strong emotional responses such as crying or hyperventilating. Also, you hear them talking about things like, I'm going to end it all, I'm going to go to sleep and never wake up, preoccupation with death, giving away possessions, substance abuse, working under the influence, driving under the influence, all major belts on Windy Reaper. Talking about harming others, child abuse or spousal abuse, loss of control, a change in behavior, or unable to take care of themselves. They can't eat, they can't sleep, they don't wash. Things we try to share with them what to do. We're providing responder reintegration information. Engage them towards meeting their own needs. How can you do that? How can you go about that? Work in normal life activities. What's normal now isn't what was normal before the fire, but what's normal. Promote resilience. Identify one of the strong points that you can see in them that they're able to use. Okay. This is phases of disaster. Zunen come out with this in the 60s, actually 50s, the 60s, Zunen and Myers, but it shows the phases of disaster. There's a pre-disaster phase, heroic stage, honeymoon stage, disillusionment, and reconstruction. So pre-disasters, things are humming, going along, whatever's going on, and you have a threat or warning, or maybe not. Then the event happens. That's the impact. They quickly go through in 2 or 3 days, 1 week, sometimes heroic stage and the honeymoon stage. The heroic stage is, wow, that was bad, but I survived it. I'm okay. I'm a superhero. I can do anything. The honeymoon stage is kind of, oh, yeah, that was tough. And I can tell it's bothering some things and some things have changed, but I can still get through. We get to the point of disillusionment, where we call it recoil in the body, where they really hit bottom. They understand what they really lost and why and what they can do or not do about it. And the point of disillusionment there to the reconstruction is where we'll do most of our work. Pre-disaster, we might have been there. Heroic, honeymoon, disillusionment, we're there if they need us, or we try to make ourselves available. From recoil to reconstruction, we'll do a lot of interventions, debriefings, defusings, one-on-ones, help them move along. How are we doing for time, Ann?
We are doing just fine. It is 11 o'clock, so we have about 30 minutes left.
Okay. We're going to talk about 2 types of interventions that have been developed over the years working with people. The ATSM, acute traumatic stress management, was developed by the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, Wayne Lindell. And it was developed actually for schools. An event happens in schools, you can use this model to really work people through. The second model, the SAFER model, was developed by Dr. George Everly with ICISF. When we started in '87, we had only defusings and debriefings, main group stuff. And right away, ICISF kept getting requests for, what do we do with the one-on-ones? So George developed the SAFER model, which is still our guide today for them. ATSM model has 6 steps to it. It actually has 10. The first 4 are physical first aid. Liver, lights, lungs, breathing. If they're okay and you still have time to work with the folks, or you're with them until somebody else comes and help or whatever. It's a guideline for assisting them with that. Observe and identify who needs help. Connect with them. Engage them in conversation. Maybe just, who are you and what happened? Maybe you have to get their attention, you know. What were you doing last Thursday night? How did that go? ground them, have them talk about the event, not the feelings. We're not gonna, we won't shut them down if they get into that, but I want to talk about what happened. We'll get through that. The support is verifying what they're saying, acknowledging what they're saying, empathizing with them, that you could see how that's just affecting them. Normalize it. It's a natural reactions to an abnormal event. Whatever you're going through is how your unconscious has decided to help you get through it. And prepare. The last step is review the event, bring them to the present, describe the future, encourage to seek them to seek help. Where I saw this used more than any other place was I did this training out in the state of Washington, and there was some of the people in the group that were nurses that were on call. If there was an accident, they would proceed. One was a school teacher, and I forget what the other one was, but they were in this class, and I was doing the training, ATSM training. And we got about down to the second step here, and they said, wait a minute, are you saying we can talk to the people? And I said, that's what this is saying, yeah. We talked to them. Well, we've been told we can work with them, stop the bleeding and get the breathing going and all, but we're not supposed to talk with them. Is that the way it is now? And I said, well, it's got to be, because your company sent me out here to talk with you about that. So now it's used. Like when I was in Cincinnati, I was doing some work, and there's a story that came out there was ambulance late at night. They got to the scene, found the mom, and mom kept asking where the baby was. They couldn't find the baby. When they did, it was beyond help. But they had to sit there until another ambulance came, because the first one with the first load. And so they used this model, got the card out and connected with them. Who are you? Where are you from? Where were you going? What were you doing? What do you know about what happened? Not the feelings, but how do you know what happened? Verify that what they're saying is fact. Empathize that. Identify normal reactions, natural reactions to an event, but don't puppet that or parrot it. Everything they say, you say, well, that's natural, and pretty soon they quit talking to you. So as you see, we see the ambulance rolling up. Review the event. You've been through a car accident. You've got a broken leg. The ambulance is here. It's going to take you to the hospital. And there'll be some people there to help you and so on. In fact, I was doing this training for the Salvation Army in St. Cloud, Minnesota. It was a 4-hour training when you take the ATSM course. And we just finished in the Salvation Army, and we had breakfast, and then we had tea, and then we had coffee, and then we had lunch. And anyway, we just got done with it, and we were all standing around waiting to go down to eat. And there was a horrific crash and kind of an explosion. Great noise, real close. I mean, it shook. This was an old church, and it shook that old church. And so we ran to the window. Joe and I were the first ones there. Joe was an EMT for the Salvation Army. We look out and we see a van parked between two gas pumps. The gas pumps were on fire, and there was a guy in the van. And there was another guy laying about 20 feet away from the pumps. And the way he was laying, his body was one way and his leg was another. We could see that was broke. And what happened was the guy in the van coming across the Mississippi River Bridge went in diabetic coma, passed out, and speeded up instead of slowing down with his foot on the foot feed, and jumped the curb and the guy that was laying over there, he was pumping gas. But thank God he was between the two vehicles or two pumps. And the van hit his vehicle, knocked over the pumps and started the pumps on fire. But it blew him, the explosion blew him that far away. So Joe and I run down there, we're the first down there, and we walk over to this guy laying down. There was nothing we could do with the fire. That the fire department was coming, we could hear that. So we went over to the guy laying on the ground, we could see he was awake, and Joe looks at me, kind of not winks, but he nods, he's going to talk to him, and he starts talking to the guy. And the guy really doesn't pay attention. So sometimes you need to get their attention by saying something that doesn't fit the situation. So what Joe did is kneel down beside him and he said, hey, what'd you think of that Vikings game yesterday? That's where that guy, if he could have come off the ground, he'd have choked Joe. He went up for him. What the hell are you talking about, the Vikings game? I'm laying here all hurting. So, well, who are you? What happened? And he said, I don't know. I was pumping gas. All of a sudden, I'm laying over here. Joe said, well, if I look at that leg, the ambulance is going to be taking you to the hospital real quick. And Joe said something I thought was great. He said, you want to call your wife? Yeah, I probably should. You know what your number is? Yeah. So Joe pulled out his phone and dialed it and he handed it to the guy. He said, honey, I've been in an accident and I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to have to go to the hospital. And his wife actually beat the ambulance to the hospital. So Joe went on a natural reaction to abnormal event, what to do about it. As they're rolling the gurney up, they're pushing us out of the way to load this guy. Joe says, by the way, you know, at the emergency room, they've got a few social workers that just hang around there to talk to people. And they can probably do you some good. So you need help, ask them. It turned out about 4 weeks later, this guy came back to Salvation Army asking for Joe. He didn't know me, remember me from Adam, but he sure remembered Joe. And he said, I want to thank you for all of that talking you did. You know, my wife not only made me there, but those counselors, they paid for 2 months of my house rent. So ATSM is a good tool, a good card. We have them on cards. And if you want, I'll send some out there, or maybe Jen's got some left from training. This is one of the cards I carry with all the time, that and the next one here. SAFER model. SAFER. Stabilize, acknowledge the crisis, facilitate understanding, encourage effective coping, and either recovery or referral. So the R is either /R. It could be one or the other. It says, when do you ask what the situation would be that you were going to ask, are you going to thinking of killing or harming yourself? Decide yourself. I mean, I'm just saying, usually you don't find that in the SAFER model or go there. So, excuse me. The SAFER model, to stabilize the situation. Number one, we're removing them from the stressor, and that might be as turning them around. It might be more than that, but it just mentally and visually removing them from the stress. Why do we do that? To stop the escalation of the chemical dump that's going on in the emotions. We want to remove them from other stressors. And if you may need to use an emergency, you might say, let's take a walk or coffee or whatever. The A is acknowledge. Have them talk about the incident. Here it says suicide, but identify what happened. And try to tie them to you, to rapport and a sense of safety. Just, it's safe talking to you, so let them talk. And it provides for ventilation. And the F, SAF, facilitate understanding. Explain. They've told you what happened and what their emotions are. So we're explaining why the symptoms are happening and normalizing those reactions. The E is encourage adaptive, effective coping, develop a safety plan, teach basic survival skills, improve immediate and short-term coping, develop a plan. And the R is either recovery or referral. If it's recovery, they go back to work. If it's referral, we need to, by the hand, lead them to a place of safety. I'll give you an example on this one. It was New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve day, downtown Minneapolis. I was doing a training for some of the ambulance folks. And a call came in, a child having trouble breathing. So a few of the guys that were in their group actually got up, left, and went to the house, 2 guys. So they get there and the driver parks there and just starts getting things ready, and the other person goes to the door. And he knocks, door opens, there's a guy standing there with a shotgun. And he says, we had a call, I'm with the ambulance service, we had a call of a child having trouble breathing. And we're here to make sure he's okay. I'd like to make sure he's okay, or to take him to wherever we need to get help. The guy kind of argued with him for a while, either 10 minutes or more, and then finally said, okay, he'd go get the kid. So he stepped out of the door. This is right at the door of the house yet. He stepped out, went and got the child wrapped in a blanket and handed it to the EMT. And the EMT takes the child and starts walking to the ambulance, and the head rolls off of the child and into the bushes. And EMT just walks over, sets it down. The driver sees that happens. Law enforcement's already sitting there. They just rushed the house and took the guy in. And I was called out of the training I was doing, saying, in case I get a guy down here, you're going to have to talk to right away. So I went down, and the guy they're talking about, his name was Jim, and he was the person that got the baby from the perpetrator. And he was catatonic. As I always do, I park my vehicle facing away from the incident so that they don't have to, we're not looking at it while we're talking. So I park and I go talk to the incident commander on site. He points me out to the guy. I go talk to the guy, and he's just standing, not doing anything. Eye movement was the only thing I caught. I said, Dad, you know it's cold out here, Minnesota, Christmas Eve. Let's go sit in my car. I want to talk to you for a bit if you're okay with that. So he just, yeah, he could do that. He didn't nodded, and so we walked down, opened the car door, set him in the car, and got in my side, and we talked a little bit. And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I ain't going back there. I said, well, if we take you to the hospital? No, I don't want to go there. I said, where do you want to go? He said, probably home. I said, okay, just hold on a minute. So just stay in the car. So I walked back to the incident commander and said, he talks that he wants to go home, and I'm okay with that if you are. And the chief said, that's okay as long as you stay with him till I get there. I said, yeah, that's the way I would have to do it. And so he could give me his address, and we drove the address, and the wife and 2 kids and his parents, and I think her parents too, were all there waiting for him to come home to open presents. So I got to his house. I asked him to stay in the car. I went in and told his wife what happened. Said it was his decision that he wanted to come home, and are you okay with that? And she said, yeah, but you're not leaving, right? And I said, yeah, that's right. And so I went out and got him, and we come in the house, and he went right upstairs to the bedroom. And the wife told the family that they should open the presents, that he wouldn't be with them. Took the chief about an hour to get there. And we sat and talked with the wife for a little bit and determined that he should be in the lockup. We should put him in the 72-hour hold. So she called him down, and the four of us sat there and talked, and he agreed. He said, as long as Casey takes me there, I'll go. And so I did. I took him to the hospital, major hospital, and checked him in. And he survived it. That was his last call. In fact, he retired about 5 years later as dispatch foreman. But that's not a typical call, but that's the typical reaction to the call. And so I took him through stabilized, right? Mitigate the escalation is go sit in the car. Tell me what happened. He could tell me just that he didn't want to be there. I explained some of the symptoms that I was picking up on and some of the things that he wasn't showing that I knew was there. And then we got to the coping part. I knew it wasn't going to happen, so developed a plan. And the plan was talk to the chief and take him home. And the referral was take him down to the lockup. Okay. I'll give you another one just to show you how well it works. This was a New Year's Eve call. I don't know why these were holiday things, but it was a single house fire, 9 children, 2 adults. New Year's Eve, the adults loaded the wood stove in the basement, and the oldest child was babysitting the rest of them. Fell asleep, the house caught on fire, and by the time the fire department got there were ashes in the basement. That's all there was. So they called me because very shortly one of their firefighters just went into the 1,000-yard stare. Was a good friend of this guy, knew him and so on. I was about half an hour away, so I got up, I got there, checked into the incident commander. He told me, he showed me where the guy was, told me his name. Walked over there, I realized I knew him, so I just said, Jim, what's going on? And he's got this 1,000-yard stare. I mean, it just, the eyes are open, but there's nothing there. And so I said, let's get away from this. And I very typically do. So I parked my car facing away. We went and got in my car and talked about what I was seeing. He wasn't talking. So I could see you're really having a hard time with this. It must be hitting you where you live. Where are you right now? Can you tell me what's going on with you right now? And finally he could start talking, and he said, you know, I was scraping through the ashes there in the basement looking for bones, and I ain't gonna do that no more. I'm not gonna do that. I said, well, I could understand that. You know this guy, you know the family and everything. I could really figure out where you come from, Jim. What do you think? What do you want to do? You want to go home? I wasn't going to give him that option, but I gave him the option. And he said, no, but I ain't going to shovel ashes, okay? I said, well, is there anything else you could do? Because I need to know it was in the front of the brain. I was picking things up. And he said, well, I could roll hose as well. That makes sense to me. So let's walk over and see the chief. So we walked over and I said, Jim says he's not going to dig in the ashes anymore, but he could roll hose. Chief looked at me as in saying, are you okay with that? And I said, I'm okay with it, Chief. I think that's a good thing. You'll be okay. And I'll stick around in case anybody else comes up, but mostly I'm sticking around in case Jim needed to talk somewhere. But he didn't. He just rolled the hose, and time they're done, they didn't get done till probably noon before they had the last body out in the corner there and everything. A lot of the guys had been gone by then, and Jim was one of them. Anyway, again, one of the ways to use this is a very, if you've called on site and there's somebody overwhelmed, this is by far the best thing I've ever found for working with that. We do this video, and or we decide not to?
At this point in time, we have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to be able to have folks have the opportunity to ask questions. So it's listed here, and the slides will be sent, and folks can look at that at another time.
Okay. I've got about a few slides left, and then we can get into talking, okay? Or you want to start that right now?
I think you have 1 or 2 more slides, and then we can open it up for questions.
Okay, here we go. A little bit harder to read, but when we're working with people, we need them to develop a resiliency plan. Number one, to see if they can, and if they can, if it's something that'll work. So focus on the short term. Get them to understand what triggers the stress, know your personal unique stressors, red flags, select your own menus, practice stress resistance, self-care daily. Mostly take care of yourself. In a resiliency plan, I'll ask them to do something today, something 6 weeks or say 30 days, 90 days, 180 days, so that can see they're thinking ahead. The last couple slides, that's my contact, and we have the National Hotline for Suicide Prevention and Idaho suicide prevention slides.
So if there are any questions that folks have, would be willing to field those right now. Either you can chat them in or unmute yourself and feel free to ask Dr. Casey. So Dr. Casey, I'm just curious as far as the COVID-19 crisis that we're experiencing right now. You see some applicability to the psychological first aid to individuals who are responding to this crisis?
Yeah, in fact, the groups I've been doing trainings with and working for, they just rolled right in with this. This made much more sense to them than something down the road. Just as psychological first aid is on the ground, and then compassion fatigue is what they're going to suffer from that helping, and that's something we can talk about in the future about. You're going to get in here, you're going to bury yourself in this, and you get overwhelmed. And compassion fatigue is what you're going to suffer from that. And then that's what we can help you fix that.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Is there anyone who would like to ask Dr. Casey a question?
This is Rebecca. I guess related to the question that was just asked about COVID-19. So you've got the compassion fatigue with the providers, but I was wondering about the effects on the people that are working now, like the people that have been deemed essential, but not the healthcare providers. The potential stress that they're under right now from having to continue to work, and the potential risk that they're facing from that while other people are able to shelter in place or telework. And then also just generally the population, people possibly feeling like there's this ongoing stress, which is a little bit different from something like a hurricane or a fire where you have an event and then it ends. I think with this, like, it seems like the end date for it is unknown. And how could we use these strategies on an ongoing basis, both to kind of recognize when we interact with people if there's a problem, and then help help them. And then, the longer term implications of that.
So you're talking about the people that are helping the helpers, or the people that are out there in the middle of it?
I'm thinking even in terms of like retail workers. I don't know how it is across the whole country, but here in Georgia, we've got the delivery workers and the people at grocery stores, and we have personal shoppers that have all been deemed to be essential workers, which means they really aren't able to elect to not work, and so that obviously places them in a position of increased risk, and they're they're not able, they don't have the same degree. We already know there's a shortage of PPE, but they don't even have the same degree of protection that that frontline medical personnel will. There's not the same level of risk as working in a hospital, obviously, but just thinking about what that stress might do to people, over like a long period of time, and how to recognize that in short interactions, I guess, like you would have in a retail setting.
Well, I think to work with the people you're working with, talking with there, the compassion fatigue course has a number of tests, the 20-question test or 10-question test, that really, if you could sit them down and just say, fill this out, takes 5 minutes, and it gives you something to talk with and also work from. So they're each going to identify 1 or 2 or 3 things that really affect them. And then you can focus on that, okay, here's what you do. And a lot of the places are using those tests every week. At the end of the shift for the week, score yourself. There's no right or wrong, it just shows where you are. And it helps the overhead, because they realize, okay, they're carrying more weight, or they're lighter this week, or whatever. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I guess I was more interested in what what we could use, like those of us who are taking this training could use as a way to just, I guess, be screening for, or if that was even appropriate, just in our day-to-day interactions with people who might be suffering from stress related to the COVID crisis. Like which of these strategies, would be the best approach?
Well, for them to identify how it's affecting them is the best approach, because they're mentally competent enough to do that. And once they can identify it, they can work on it. If they sit down and look at, okay, this is what I put in the test, how do you know what's going on with yourself, type of thing. And then what can you do about it? So if you can get to that, if you could put it in that perspective, that's what I would do. I'd have them in small groups and have them just take a test and score themselves, and then talk about it. As far as on site, where you work, is there a center that people typically go to if they need help? The staff, the faculty?
No.
Or perhaps, I guess just a thought that I have, Rebecca, too, some of those initial things with psychological first aid is, you know, attending to people's basic needs and having a conversation with them. It sounds like from what you're saying, Dr. Casey, employing some of those listening skills, the coping with stress, the being able to identify that this is a normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. Some of those initial basics, psychological first aid skills that you've used with traumatic events could also be applied to people who are experiencing the sustained COVID crisis as a
Yes.
frontline worker.
That's exactly what I'm saying, yeah. I was called down to St. Catherine's University to work with their staff because they've been involved with this for a few weeks already. And I just took 3 of the tests from the compassion fatigue educator course. And it gave us something to talk about for 2 hours. By the time everybody scored theirs, and one scored an 8 and one scored a 20. And, you know, this is all confidential. And it really helped people understand where they were, number one, and then take a look at how they're coping and who's doing something better. I can do that, you know. So,
Dr. Casey, if individuals have follow-up questions specifically related to their environment and how to apply the psychological first aid, I believe your contact information is here. In the past, you've been definitely open to folks getting in touch with you, and I hope that we could continue to get conversation between participants and yourself.
yeah. Yeah, I'm wide open to that, and I put the address on the screen. And also, you're talking about the compassion fatigue course. The people they send to that are going to really take some real good tools back to work with the rest of the folks they're working with.
Do we have any other questions from the group at this particular time?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I just really want to thank you for this. I think that it was very interesting. It's interesting for, I think those of us, maybe kind of following on what Rebecca was saying, that if you're not in LCSW or you don't have that background, it's interesting to know what you can do as a layperson. And I think the only thing I would, maybe question is like some of my own worries or insecurities about, is this okay for me to put this into, or try to do this if when those situations arise, and am I comfortable enough to say this is to refer them and to know when to refer? I think that was the thing that kind of kept playing in my mind all along. Your information was excellent, and your stories really helped put things into perspective.
Thank you.
Again, want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'll have the opportunity to send these slides to participants. And again, if anyone has any additional follow-up questions, Dr. Casey's open to more conversation. So wish everyone well today. And again, thank you so much for joining us.